Who are the 50 best players in fantasy baseball this coming season? Let's take a look and count them down. At number 50, we have shortstop Xander Bogaerts, now of the San Diego Padres, one of their many shortstops. This should be a good offense. We know Bogaerts as a quality hitter has been reliable for several years now. Is there any reason to be concerned about him? Maybe a little bit in the power department. Did see a dip last year down to 15 home runs. Now going to a less favorable ballpark there in San Diego. Bogaerts has never been a guy for massive power. He's also not a guy who gets you speed. You're not looking at double-digit steals at all. And he's now entering his age 30 season. But these are nitpicks. This is still a guy who knows how to hit for average, should score a bunch of runs, and drive in RBIs. So he does still make the cut for the top 50, just barely. The one and only closer you'll see here is Edwin Diaz at 47. 32 saves, again, back-to-back seasons for the Mets closer. His best season by far in terms of ratios. He was lights out. A whip under 1, an ERA under 1.5. The strikeout numbers are there, and the Mets should put him in position to win plenty of close games. I don't always love picking a closer early in the first couple rounds of a draft, but if you want to nail down that guy who's going to get you saves in a roto league, Diaz should be the first off the board. It might be a bit surprising to see a prospect like Corbin Carroll this high. Got him at 44. I know I might be a little overly optimistic here. He might not be the next Julio Rodriguez, but this is a guy who's actually technically faster than J-Rod. He had the highest sprint speed in the league last year in his limited time. He can fly. You know he's got some pop. Really high upside here. I think he's worth the gamble at this part of your draft. I talk about him a lot more in my top 10 prospects video. And then a couple of veterans I think are underrated. Corey Seager. The final numbers weren't amazing. His first year of a massive contract with the Rangers only hit 245, which is uncharacteristic. But if you dig a little deeper, his expected batting average was in the 96th percentile. He was a massive underachiever in that category, and he's definitely one of those guys who's going to benefit from the shift being banned now. So we could see that batting average jump up really to the 300 range this season, and you know he's got good power. I love grabbing Seager at shortstop. And Ozzie Albies, maybe he was valued a little too high in terms of his ranking last year. Kind of struggled at first and then got hurt, so it was a lost year for the most part. But let's not forget, this is a guy who at second base, which isn't the deepest position in fantasy, has really great power. He's going to score a ton of runs. You know he's going to be among the league leaders in that category. Driving runs is still one of the most potent lineups there in Atlanta. So you can get him in the top 50. I would definitely do it if you don't want to wait on second base. Looking at my rankings 31 through 40 now, I love me some Jazz. Jazz Chisholm is a guy who could help you across all 5 categories. He has the speed, he's got the power, more power even than a lot of people and scouts thought. Well on his way to a full breakout season until injury wiped out half of it last year. Now you might have heard that he's going to play center field this season. Well, I think that's okay. That'll keep him probably on the field longer, and it just extends his eligibility. So now you got a guy who qualifies at second base, maybe at shortstop and in the outfield. Jazz Chisholm is a guy who could be a difference maker. Nolan Arenado, not the most exciting name on draft day anymore, but he just keeps chugging along. A guy who will get you 30 home runs and 100 RBIs over a full season. You can pretty much bank on it. Oh, and by the way, an average in the 290s. He still has that elite plate discipline. In a points league, he's valued even higher. But even in Roto, I mean, this is as solid, consistent as you can get. And I'll talk about this all the time. Third base is a very shallow position this season, so you don't want to wait too long. If you can get a guy who is a true stud at the position, I wouldn't hesitate to do it. And at number 32, a guy who's definitely going to be one of my guys this season. I will keep taking chances on Luis Robert in order to see if he does finally have that full-fledged breakout. Great speed, you know he's got power, cut down on the strikeouts, and he can hit for average. Could he potentially put it all together and put up an MVP caliber season? He's got to try to play something close to a full 162. La Russa out, maybe a little more stretching in there. I hope that we see the White Sox as a collective unit actually put it together. Looking at 21 through 30, you'll see 3 Braves in a row here, 2 of which were rookies last year. Hard to believe that the Braves managed to come away with the best rookie hitter and pitcher in the league, but they did so with Michael Harris and Spencer Strider. Is Strider legit enough to be considered an ace? There's nothing that says that he isn't. He's a guy who has that velocity. The K numbers are ridiculous. There's no reason to indicate, based on his swinging strike rate, that regression is in order. So you're still looking at a guy who's going to pile up wins, pile up strikeouts. The ratios should stay intact. Strider is definitely going to be worth one of the top 10 picks at starting pitcher. Michael Harris, my concern with him last year was that he just wasn't going to run enough. Even though he had that great sprint speed, 95th percentile, he was starting out the season in the bottom of the order, but he wound up playing out the whole season, stole 20 bases, and almost hit 20 home runs to boot. Interesting that he managed to almost hit 300 also, despite having pretty bad plate discipline numbers, a high K rate, really low walk rate. Can he pull that off again next year? Even if the average does go down, the power speed combo, the placement in Atlanta's lineup, you've got to love his upside. I don't think it's a stretch to consider him a top 30 pick. And then we have to talk about Fernando Tatis Jr. I have him right there at number 25. This is a make or break pick. Could be MVP, both in real life and in fantasy, but there's the shoulder and the knee, and we don't even know about the wrist. Supposedly the shoulder's fine, but the wrist isn't quite there. The guy can accumulate at least 500 at-bats. You still might get a good return on investment with a top 25 pick. Looking now inside the top 20, I might be the lowest on Mookie Betts. Still an amazing hitter. My only concern here, why I have him a little bit lower than some of these guys, is the fact that the average now sits in the 260s for 2 straight seasons since moving to LA. And the speed, well, it's not gone, but I worry this might be the season where he finally gets down to single digits in stolen bases. Good production in most categories, but not really that 5-category stud that we're used to. So I don't want to overpay for this name recognition for his track record. Bobby Witt Jr. at 13. Is that ranking too optimistic or is it too conservative? 20 homers, 30 steals as a rookie. This is a guy who will get the green light. He's a sprint speed in the 100th percentile. We know that he's going to keep developing his eye as a batter. We could see that average jump up even higher. You might compare him to a guy like Bo Bichette the year before. High-end prospect, came in, had that power speed combo, and then maybe got a little overdrafted last year until he finally came through late. Bobby Witt, some people might be a little worried to have a repeat that he's not worth a first-round pick. I tend to disagree because his speed trumps that of Bichette, and even though he might not score as much, even though the RBIs might not be there, this is somebody who will help you significantly more in the category that is hard to accumulate. Here's the big difference. He's a third baseman. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Third base is mad shallow if you can get that elite player at the position, especially one who's going to get you speed. You do it. And as far as starting pitchers go, well, here's the conversation. Corbin Burns, number 1. I think there's really no question about that. What about Jacob deGrom? That's the big question. Can we really have him this high knowing how much he has missed over the past couple of seasons? I tend to think that even a team like the Rangers, as much as they've been throwing money at free agents the last couple of years, they wouldn't have invested in deGrom if they were really that concerned. It wasn't Tommy John surgery. Age, of course, that's a concern. Health, track record, yeah, we can't ignore that. But even if you get just 2/3 of a season of a guy like deGrom, I would take that over any other pitcher not named Corbin Burns. And now we've hit the top 10. You want to know who's number 1? If you already saw my video, you knew this answer. It is Ronald Acuna Jr., and you can check out my full explanation of why he is the first one if you watch that one. But let's talk about the other players in here. How's Trey Turner down to number 4? You might notice he's been trending downward in a couple of categories, namely stolen bases. He was still one of the best last year with 27 steals, but that's not Julio Rodriguez level, and I don't think it will be Ronald Acuna level this year. Batting average, still among the best, but instead of hitting in the 340s like in his prime, it was not even to 300. It's really hard to find any fault in Turner's game with what he brings to the table. He did have a career-high 100 RBI last season, but he's maybe going to be a slight step below those other 2 younger players who bring you more power and more speed with Acuna and Rodriguez. And I do think that Yordan Alvarez outpaces him, well, definitely in the home run category, and I think batting average and RBIs as well. And is it fair to have Aaron Judge, guy who just set an AL record in home runs and helped a lot of fantasy teams single-handedly win their leagues, to have him down at number 7 when you could argue that he was the most valuable player in fantasy last season? I think it is. He has a history of injuries. There are some concerns whether he'll hold up. Of course, there's the fact that instead of playing to get paid, he got paid. I'm not going to reach to put him in my top 5 when I know there are players who do have as much upside as he does across every category other than home runs and don't have quite the same level of risk. What about the players who didn't make this list but could be ready to break out and join the elite of fantasy baseball this year? I got you covered. Check out this video right here.